A young boy named Malik secretly aids Rahim, a lonely old man living near a tense military outpost. When General Idran arrives searching for Malik, long-buried tensions surface. Idran reveals Rahim's past as a former intelligence officer tied to a failed mission that cost many lives, including Rahim's son. As Malik becomes the bridge between the two men, painful truths about betrayal, altered orders, and suppressed evidence emerge. Rahim grapples with grief while Idran confronts his own guilt. As outside factions stir and danger mounts, Malik witnesses how fragile the line is between justice, loyalty, and the heavy cost of truth. Dawn bled slowly across the military outpost at the edge of the valley, casting long amber streaks over barbed wire and weather-beaten barracks. In that fragile hour, when the world felt half awake, a small boy padded quietly across the gravel path. His name was Malik, the 12-year-old son of a soldier stationed far from home. Every morning he slipped away before the bugle sounded, moving with a purpose too heavy for his narrow shoulders. Anyone watching him might wonder what responsibility pressed upon a child's daily ritual. Yet Malik carried the habit with steady resolve shaped by unseen necessity. Quietly, beyond the outer fence lived an old man named Rahim, whose hut leaned like a tired traveler against the slope above the outpost. His beard, silver as moonlit frost, framed a face marked by years of dust storms, war, and stubborn endurance. Malik visited him every morning, bringing water, bread, and whatever rations his father quietly spared. Rahim accepted them with a gentle nod, as though simplicity were a sacred ritual. Few knew of their bond, fewer cared. Yet in the quiet exchange of provisions and stories, a fragile companionship formed, delicate as early light brushing the valley each day. Malik had first met Rahim during a dust storm that swallowed the valley months earlier. The boy had been searching for a missing tool his father needed when the wind rose like a furious beast, forcing him toward Rahim's hut. The old man had guided him inside, shielding him with a patched blanket that smelled of pine smoke and age. From that moment, Malik returned whenever he could, drawn by something steady in Rahim's quiet presence. The outpost felt harsh, but the hut felt like a secret refuge, where stories softened the world's hard edges and fear dared not enter. But not everyone saw the refuge in the same light. Soldiers passing by sometimes muttered suspicions, noting Rahim's solitude and the silence surrounding his past. Malik heard fragments, whispers about former alliances, old conflicts, betrayals etched into dusty records. He never asked Rahim about them. Instead, he carried the weight of adult rumor with the innocence of a boy trying to reconcile loyalty and caution. Yet even he sensed tension coiling through the outpost lately, a quiet unrest stirred by incoming orders and coded messages. Something was shifting in the valley's uneasy balance, though he could not yet name it today. Each morning, as Malik approached Rahim's hut, a recurring sound followed him, the distant rumble of approaching convoys. It had become a daily rhythm, blending with the soft scrape of his sandals and the old man's cough echoing faintly through the doorway. Today the rumble felt heavier, as though carrying unspoken intent. Malik paused before knocking, sensing the morning held an unusual hush. Rahim opened the door slowly, his eyes weary but warm. He greeted Malik with a faint smile, yet something trembled behind it, like a shadow waiting for the sun to reveal its shape fully in the valley today. Malik set the rations on the small wooden table, noticing Rahim's hands tremble as he reached for the cup of water. The boy pretended not to see, offering stories instead, simple tales from the barracks, moments meant to ease the old man's worry. Rahim listened carefully, though his gaze drifted often to the window overlooking the hazy ridge. Outside, the rumble of vehicles grew louder, closer, heavier. Malik felt its presence pressed against the hut walls. When he asked Rahim what troubled him, the old man hesitated, lips parting as though holding a truth too delicate to release that morning still. Instead of answering, Rahim reached beneath his blanket and produced a worn leather pouch. He placed it before Malik with trembling caution, as if offering something both precious and dangerous. The boy stared, unsure whether to touch it. Rahim nodded, urging him silently. Inside lay an old insignia, tarnished, cracked, but unmistakably military. Malik recognized its symbol from the outpost walls. Confusion flickered across his face. Rahim whispered that he once served under a commander whose decisions fractured lives across the valley. That insignia, he said, carried a burden heavier than any weapon, a memory that still stalked him at night. The vehicles finally reached the outpost gates, engines roaring like restless thunder. Malik and Rahim both turned toward the noise, sensing its significance before any announcement arrived. Soldiers moved with rigid urgency, forming lines, preparing for someone important. Dust rose in curling plumes as a sleek, armored transport halted near the command tent. Even from the hut, Malik felt the shift in atmosphere, the scraping tension of authority descending. Rahim's breath grew shallow. He muttered that a figure from his past had returned, a man whose presence carved old wounds open. Malik listened, heart pounding, unsure what storm approached now outside. Moments later, footsteps thundered along the path toward Rahim's hut. Malik froze, instinct tightening his breath. Rahim closed his eyes briefly, as though bracing for a verdict long delayed. The hut door rattled beneath a sharp knock. When Malik opened it, a tall officer stood framed in morning dust, his uniform marked with medals and authority. His gaze swept across the boy, then toward Rahim. He identified himself as General Idran, commander of the Valley's forces. His voice carried the weight of command as he asked for Malik by name, leaving the air thick with questions neither dared voice today. Malik stepped forward, confusion slicing through him like cold wind. General Idran studied him with an expression hard to decipher, a blend of recognition, urgency, and muted sorrow. Malik glanced at Rahim, who seemed suddenly smaller, as if time were folding him inward. The general explained that he had searched the valley for the boy, claiming matters of deep importance required Malik's presence. A hush settled over the hut, heavy as dust after a storm. Malik's heart fluttered with dread and wonder. Outside, the convoy waited. Inside, two histories converged. The morning's fragile calm shattered completely in the valley today. Morning light slanted across the valley as Malik stepped outside Rahim's hut, the dust still trembling from the convoy's arrival. General Idran waited with the immovable patience of a man accustomed to obedience, his gaze never leaving the boy. Malik felt the weight of that stare, an unspoken demand pressing against his ribs. Behind him, Rahim lingered in the doorway, a silent silhouette shaped by fear Malik did not yet understand. Wind swept across the ridge, lifting loose grains of sand into a faint shimmer, as if the land itself braced for something long buried to resurface. Malik swallowed hard, unsure where to stand. The general motioned for Malik to walk with him, gesturing toward the narrow path leading down to the outpost. Malik hesitated, glancing back at Rahim, who watched with haunted eyes. General Idran's tone softened, but only slightly, as he assured the boy that no harm would come to him. Yet the words felt rehearsed, as if spoken more for protocol than truth. Malik followed reluctantly, each step echoing with uncertainty. The old man's hut grew smaller behind him, sinking into the hillside like an old secret retreating from daylight. Somewhere in the distance, a radio crackled with coded tension. As they descended, Idran asked Malik how long he had known the old man. Malik answered truthfully, describing the dust storm, the shelter, and the daily visits. The general listened without interruption, but his jaw tightened at every mention of Rahim's kindness. Malik noticed the contrast between the man's stern exterior and the quiet storm gathering behind his eyes unsettled him. Soldiers at the outpost straightened as the general approached, their expressions rigid. Malik walked beside him, a small shadow against a towering figure whose presence reshaped the atmosphere. Something about the man suggested that whatever brought him here reached far beyond military routine. General Idran led Malik into the command tent, where maps covered the walls like sprawling veins of conflict. A dim lamp flickered above a table strewn with files. Malik felt small under the watchful gaze of unfamiliar officers, each one scrutinizing him with a mix of curiosity and something else he couldn't name. Idran dismissed them with a curt gesture, leaving only the two of them inside. The general's face softened, revealing a trace of sorrow that startled Malik. Idran explained that Rahim was once a decorated intelligence officer, one who vanished after a scandal that fractured the valley's fragile alliances. Malik listened, heart tightening. The general continued, speaking of betrayals carved into wartime records, missions that ended in death, documents that disappeared, and a final operation that collapsed under mysterious circumstances. Rahim, he said, was the last link to a truth buried beneath political maneuvering. Malik absorbed the words slowly, struggling to reconcile them with the gentle man who shared stories and bread with him each morning. Idran watched him closely, gauging every flicker of emotion. Then, with unexpected gentleness, He told Malik that Rahim had once saved a young soldier's life, his own, during an ambush that nearly wiped out their unit. Gratitude mixed sharply with suspicion in his voice. Malik blinked, surprised. Idran explained that after saving him, Rahim vanished, carrying information that could have shifted the war's outcome. Some believed he defected. Others believed he hid to protect the truth from manipulation. Malik felt a ripple of confusion, sensing that the general's narrative held both sincerity and omission. Idran finally revealed why he sought Malik. Reports had surfaced about Rahim speaking to a boy, and trusting him with objects, perhaps secrets. Malik stiffened at the mention of the leather pouch. Idran noticed. His expression darkened, not with anger, but with urgency. He asked Malik directly what Rahim had given him. Malik hesitated, the weight of loyalty pressing hard against fear. He thought of Rahim's trembling hands, the insignia glinting faintly in the morning light, and the silent plea in the old man's eyes. Malik answered carefully, saying that Rahim told stories and shared memories, nothing more. Idran studied him, searching for cracks in the boy's voice. Malik held steady. After a long pause, the general sighed, rubbing his temples as though burdened by years of unfinished business. He told Malik he wasn't here to punish the old man, but to uncover the truth behind a betrayal that reshaped the valley's course. Doubt still lingered in his tone. Idran stepped closer, lowering his voice. He revealed something unexpected. Rahim had a son once, a boy who died during a failed operation ordered by Idran himself. That tragedy, he believed, fractured Rahim's loyalty and drove him into exile. Malik felt the air twist around them, thick with old grief. The general admitted he did not know whether Rahim blamed him or the system, but he suspected the old man carried more sorrow than accusation. Malik pictured Rahim's distant stare, the tremor in his hands, the shadows lingering behind every gentle smile. For the first time, the boy realized how much pain hid beneath the old man's calm. Malik finally asked why the general needed him. Idran's gaze sharpened. He explained that Rahim would never speak to officers, but he trusted Malik. Through the boy, Idran hoped to understand whether Rahim possessed information that could reignite conflict or prevent it. Malik felt trapped between two worlds, one shaped by uniformed command, the other by quiet kindness in a dim hut. Idran placed a firm hand on the boy's shoulder, urging him to help for the valley's sake. Malik nodded slowly, though uncertainty gnawed at him. He wondered whether truth served justice, or merely reopened wounds that time barely mended. When the general dismissed him, Malik stepped back into the sunlight, shaken. The outpost hummed with restless energy, soldiers preparing for unknown outcomes. Malik's heart pounded as he climbed the path toward Rahim's hut once more. Each step felt heavier than the last, as though the valley's history settled on his small shoulders. Rahim waited at the doorway, his gaze narrowing as he saw the boy's expression. Malik hesitated, unsure how to begin, unsure which truth belonged to whom. Behind him, the outpost glimmered like a distant machine of decisions he barely understood. Ahead, Rahim's hut stood quiet, carrying secrets shaped by sacrifice. The valley seemed to hold its breath. Afternoon light stretched thin across the valley as Malik approached Rahim's hut once more, each footstep stirring up soft bursts of dust that hovered like hesitant ghosts. The air felt heavier than it had that morning, weighed down by the conversation inside the command tent and the truths that hung between past and present. Malik paused near the doorway, sensing the gravity of what was to come. Rahim watched him with a gaze sharpened by intuition, his frail body straightening slightly as though bracing for a question he had long expected. The boy stepped inside, the familiar scent of pine smoke wrapping around him like an old memory. Rahim gestured for him to sit. Malik lowered himself onto the woven mat, palms resting against jittery knees. The old man studied his face, tracing the tension etched around the boy's eyes. He asked gently what the general had said. Malik hesitated, torn between loyalty and fear. He finally admitted that Idran believed Rahim carried secrets capable of shaping the valley's future, secrets tied to betrayal, loyalty, and loss. Rahim listened with a stillness that felt almost sacred. When Malik mentioned Rahim's son, the old man's breath faltered, a tremor sweeping across his weathered features like a sudden winter gust. For a long moment Rahim said nothing, letting silence settle around them. Malik waited, heart pounding in the quiet, until Rahim finally spoke, his voice low, brittle, almost unsteady. He confirmed he once had a son, a bright young soldier named Jalen, whose laughter had filled their home like warm sunlight before the war claimed him. Rahim's gaze drifted to the window where daylight filtered through cracks in the wood. He explained that Jalen had died during an operation ordered by General Idran, a mission Rahim had opposed but was overruled on. The failure shattered not only the unit but the bond between two men who had once trusted one another with their lives. Malik felt a sting behind his eyes. He had never imagined Rahim carrying such grief behind his calm demeanor. The old man continued, revealing that Jalen's death wasn't the end of the tragedy. In the aftermath, Rahim had discovered disturbing discrepancies in the operations documents, plans altered without his knowledge, intel that contradicted earlier reports, signatures that didn't match. When he confronted higher officials, he was dismissed, accused of fabricating suspicions fueled by grief. He persisted, compiling the inconsistencies into a file, but before he could present it, the file vanished and Rahim was reassigned to a remote post far from strategic networks. Rahim's voice wavered as he recounted how he eventually realized he was being discredited. Rumors spread, undermining his reputation, painting him as unstable. He decided to disappear before he could be silenced more permanently. He left the military, taking only the insignia, a few personal belongings, and a single photograph of Jalen, one he kept hidden beneath the floorboards. Malik listened, transfixed by the layers unfolding before him, not betrayal, but a man trying to expose a truth others wanted buried. Rahim confessed he did not know whether Idran had been complicit or merely a pawn in a larger scheme. Pain, not anger, shaped his words. Malik finally asked about the insignia in the leather pouch. Rahim explained it belonged to the unit he once commanded, Jalen's unit. He had kept it as both memorial and reminder of the injustice unresolved. The insignia, he said, was not a secret weapon or coded message, but it symbolized a truth he feared the military would rather erase, evidence of negligence, manipulation, and sacrificed lives. The boy absorbed everything, feeling the weight of a narrative far more tangled than he had been led to believe. He understood then why Rahim trusted him, not because he sought a messenger, but because he needed someone unburdened by agendas. Soft wind rattled the hut's walls as Rahim leaned back, exhaustion pressing upon him. Malik asked whether Rahim wanted Idran to know the truth, or whether revealing it would only reopen wounds that never healed. The old man closed his eyes, struggling with the question. He admitted that part of him wanted Idran to carry the full burden of what happened to Jalen. Another part longed for closure, for acknowledgement, for some thread of justice that might restore dignity to his son's memory. Yet fear lingered, fear that truth might spark retaliation or reignite dormant tensions. He said he needed time, just a little more time. Their conversation ended abruptly when hurried footsteps pounded up the slope. Malik's breath caught as a soldier appeared in the doorway, panting, asking urgently whether Malik was inside. The man looked uneasy, explaining that the general requested the boy's presence again, immediately. Malik and Rahim exchanged tense glances. Malik rose reluctantly, promising to return. Rahim offered a faint nod, though his eyes glimmered with worry that tightened Malik's chest. As the boy stepped outside, the valley seemed darker than moments before, as though shadows lengthened in anticipation of truths colliding sooner than either man hoped. Back at the outpost, Malik found General Idran alone in the command tent, his posture rigid, his expression strained. He wasted no time. He asked Malik whether Rahim had spoken about the mission, about Jalen, about the missing file. Malik realized then that Idran already knew parts of the truth, perhaps more than he had admitted earlier. The general pressed gently, insisting that Malik could help prevent further conflict. Malik, recalling Rahim's vulnerability, chose his words carefully. He said Rahim carried sorrow, not treason, memories, not plots. Idran looked away, jaw tightening as if wrestling with something long buried inside him. Malik finally asked Idran directly whether he blamed himself for Jalen's death. The question struck the general like a physical blow. Idran's voice cracked as he admitted he had doubted the operation from the beginning but followed orders from higher command. He confessed he lived with regret, questioning whether he could have saved Jalen or prevented the catastrophe. Malik sensed the anguish behind the man's hardened mask. Idran then revealed why he needed Rahim's truth. Without closure, the valley's fragile alliances remained vulnerable. Old factions whispered of betrayal, ready to resurrect conflicts. Rahim's testimony could extinguish those flames, or ignite them. Malik returned to Rahim, torn between empathy and duty. The old man watched him quietly, understanding without needing words. Malik explained Idran's request, the general's remorse, the need for truth that transcended personal wounds. Rahim listened, eyes reflecting both pain and contemplation. The wind outside rose, carrying the scent of dust and distant camp smoke. After a long silence, Rahim whispered that he would speak, not for the military, not for Idran, but for Jalen, whose story deserved to be heard. Malik exhaled, relief and fear mingling within him. The valley felt poised on the edge of revelation, its breath held, waiting. Evening settled over the valley like a slow exhale, the sky turning a muted gold that bled into deepening blue. Shadows stretched long across the hills, and lanterns began flickering to life around the outpost, their glow wavering in the encroaching dusk. Malik guided Rahim carefully down the winding path, supporting the old man's frail arm as they approached the command tent. The air thrummed with tension. Soldiers murmured low, eyes tracking their progress with a mixture of curiosity and apprehension. Malik felt each gaze like a weight, but he kept moving, steady, carrying Rahim's quiet resolve with him. General Idran stood outside the tent, his posture rigid but his eyes softened by something unspoken, something heavy. As Rahim neared, Idran straightened, the two men locking gazes for the first time in years. 1,000 unspoken memories seemed to pulse between them, carved by war, loyalty, and loss. Malik stepped back, sensing the gravity of the moment. Idran greeted Rahim with formal respect, but a tremor passed through the general's voice, a fracture revealing regret that no rank could bury. Rahim nodded, not coldly, but with the weary dignity of a man who carried sorrow like a second skin. Inside the tent, lanterns cast broad pools of light across scattered maps and aging documents. The air smelled of dust, ink, and unvoiced truths. Rahim lowered himself into a chair, Malik standing close beside him as though anchoring the fragile tension. Idran dismissed the surrounding officers, leaving only the three of them in the quiet space. When the canvas flap closed, silence settled deep and thick. Malik watched the two men across the table, one carved from authority, the other shaped by loss, each waiting for the other to speak first, as though choosing the wrong moment might crack the valley's delicate balance. Rahim finally began, his voice rough but steady. He recounted the operation once more, not as accusation but as testimony. He spoke of flawed intelligence, sudden changes in orders, and the fear he had felt when he realized something was wrong, fear sharpened by the knowledge that his son was among the deployed soldiers. He explained how he had confronted superiors about inconsistencies, only to be dismissed. As Rahim spoke, Idran's expression tightened, guilt flickering behind his eyes. Malik watched the general struggle with each word, as though every detail carved deeper into wounds he had tried to conceal beneath command and duty. Then Rahim revealed something he had never shared, not with the military, not even with former comrades. Before his file disappeared, he had uncovered a marked transmission log showing that the operation orders had been altered by an official above both him and Idran. The altered version deliberately exposed Jalen's unit to maximum risk to secure political leverage with an allied faction. Rahim had kept a single handwritten copy of the log's coordinates, hidden for years beneath the floorboards of his hut. Idran's jaw clenched, fury rippling through him, not at Rahim, but at the betrayal they both had unknowingly served. Malik felt his pulse quicken. The truth threaded into place, heavy but clarifying. Rahim explained that he never revealed the document earlier because speaking out meant inviting powerful retaliation. He had chosen silence to survive, living quietly on the edge of the valley while the military forged its own version of history. But now, with Malik as witness and bridge, Rahim felt he could finally release the burden he had carried for so long. Idran leaned forward, voice strained, asking whether Rahim still possessed the copy. Rahim nodded slowly. He said it was hidden but recoverable, if the military would guarantee his safety. Idran did not hesitate. He promised protection, not out of strategic necessity but out of deep remorse. Malik felt the sincerity in the general's tone. Yet even with that assurance, Rahim's hands trembled slightly as he recited the old coordinates. Malik watched Idran record them carefully, his face shadowed by the weight of truths long buried under layers of politics and pride. The general then admitted his own share of responsibility, that he had obeyed orders he doubted, trusted a system flawed by ambition, and failed to challenge decisions that cost lives. The confession seemed to crack something inside him, a fracture widening into honesty. For the first time that afternoon, Rahim looked directly at Idran with softened eyes. He told the general that he never blamed him alone, that grief had distorted the early edges of the truth, but time had carved clarity. The real betrayal had come from higher command, from those who viewed men like Jalen as expendable pieces on a strategic board. Idran lowered his head, struggling to steady his breath. Malik watched the exchange unfold like a fragile reconciliation shaped by shared suffering. The tension between the two men began to shift, not toward forgiveness, but toward recognition of each other's humanity. Suddenly, the tent flap burst open and a frantic officer entered, breathless. He reported that a faction within the valley, long dormant, had intercepted rumors of Rahim's testimony and was mobilizing fighters. They believed Rahim's story could expose their involvement in past operations. Malik felt dread settle coldly in his stomach. Idran cursed under his breath and demanded immediate defensive preparations. The officer rushed away. Rahim tightened his grip on the table's edge, understanding fully the danger now closing in. Malik looked between Rahim and Idran, realizing the revelation had not only stirred old wounds, it had reignited dormant threats waiting for an opportunity. Idran turned to Rahim, urgency reanimating his posture. He insisted they move Rahim to a secure bunker before the faction could act. Rahim, exhausted but determined, agreed. Malik helped him stand. Outside, the valley pulsed with rising tension, soldiers sprinting, vehicles rumbling, the air electric with anticipation. As they moved Rahim toward the fortified shelter, Malik felt fear and purpose intertwine inside him. He sensed the valley shifting again, as though history itself stirred in the dust beneath their feet, preparing for a reckoning that stretched far beyond one old man's testimony. Just before entering the bunker, Rahim paused, gripping Malik's hand. He told the boy that truth, once spoken, carried a life of its own, dangerous, relentless, but necessary. Malik nodded, his eyes burning. The old man then looked toward Idran and said that when this was over, the valley must remember Jalen not as a casualty, but as a son lost to ambition's cruelty. Idran swallowed hard, promising he would make sure of it. As the bunker doors sealed with a heavy clang, Malik felt the world holding its breath again. The truth was no longer hidden, and the storm it summoned was coming. Night settled over the valley like a shroud of ink, swallowing the horizon in a deep, trembling darkness. Floodlights flickered across the outpost as soldiers hurried into position, their silhouettes slicing through dust clouds whipped up by the rising wind. Malik stood near the bunker entrance, the iron door sealed behind him, protecting Rahim inside. Every sound felt amplified, the clatter of rifles, the hum of engines, the distant echo of shifting terrain. He sensed the valley bracing for impact, the air tightening as though the land itself held its breath. Somewhere in the darkness, unseen forces gathered, stirred by truths newly unearthed. General Idran strode toward Malik, his expression carved with urgency and resolve. He explained that scouts had spotted the faction approaching from the northern ridge, armed, organized, desperate to silence Rahim before his testimony could reshape the valley's narrative. Idran placed a reassuring hand on Malik's shoulder, promising to protect him and the old man inside the bunker. Malik nodded, though his heart thudded painfully in his chest. The valley had always felt vast and quiet. Now it seemed narrow, tense, like a bowstring pulled taut in the hands of fate. Malik glanced back at the bunker door, wishing he could trade places with Rahim. Moments later, the first gunshot cracked through the night, a single, sharp sound that split the silence like a blade. Soldiers scrambled into defensive formation as shadows moved along the ridge. The faction attacked with fierce determination, their bullets sparking against metal barricades. Idran barked orders, directing units with precision born from years of command. Malik ducked behind a supply crate, instinct driving him to safety, though his thoughts clung desperately to Rahim inside the bunker. The boy felt both fear and purpose thrumming through him, recognizing that the truth he helped uncover had drawn the valley into a dangerous reckoning. Explosions lit the hillside in bursts of orange flame. The ground trembled beneath Malik's feet as debris scattered across the outpost. Soldiers shouted, smoke stinging the air with acrid heaviness. Malik tried to steady his breath, but panic pressed in around him like a tightening vice. He knew Rahim was vulnerable inside the bunker, frail and already weakened by the day's tension. Malik's thoughts screamed for him to remain hidden, yet his body moved before his mind could catch up. He sprinted toward the bunker, weaving through chaos, gripping the insignia Rahim had given him earlier as though it were a talisman. General Idran caught sight of him and called out, panic breaking through his usual command tone. Malik slid behind a barricade, gasping that he needed to check on Rahim. Idran hesitated, torn between responsibility and the instinct to shield the boy. Then another explosion struck the far wall, sending a shockwave that forced the general's decision. Idran nodded sharply, telling Malik to stay low and follow him. Together they advanced toward the bunker under cover of defensive fire. Malik felt each second stretch long and thin, time elongating beneath the urgent rhythm of combat and fear. When they reached the bunker door, Idran signaled a guard to unlock it. The heavy metal groaned as it opened, revealing Rahim seated against the far wall, illuminated by a dim emergency lantern. His breathing was shallow, but his eyes brightened at the sight of Malik. The old man asked whether the valley was falling apart again. Idran responded honestly. The faction wanted to erase the truth, but the military would hold the line. Rahim looked at Malik then, a soft, sad smile crossing his worn features. He said the valley had always been shaped by those courageous enough to seek clarity in chaos. Suddenly, another explosion rattled the ground, this one closer, too close. Dust rained from the bunker's ceiling as alarms blared. Malik's pulse surged. Idran ordered Rahim to move with them to a deeper shelter, but the old man shook his head. His body was failing him. The climb and chaos would steal what strength he had left. Idran tried to insist, but Rahim raised a trembling hand, silencing him. He told the general that Jalen's truth was now in Idran's possession, and that Malik had carried more courage today than many soldiers ever would. Rahim urged them to go before the bunker became a target. Malik refused to leave him, tears burning behind his eyes. Rahim cupped the boy's face gently, telling him that the valley needed him to remember, not just the conflict, but the quiet moments of compassion that shaped true courage. He pressed the insignia into Malik's palm, closing the boy's fingers around it. Idran's face twisted with grief and urgency. The general knew the faction would soon breach the outer defenses. He lifted Malik by the shoulders, urging him toward the door. Malik struggled, begging Rahim to come. But Rahim only smiled softly, eyes glimmering like fading stars, whispering that some truths were carried best by those still able to grow. Idran pulled Malik out just as another blast shook the ground. The bunker door slammed shut. Before they could secure it, a deafening explosion erupted from the far side of the outpost. A plume of fire swallowed the night sky. Malik screamed as Idran dragged him behind cover, shielding him from the storm of debris. When the dust finally settled, the bunker entrance lay in ruins, collapsed, smoke curling from its shattered frame. Malik broke free of Idran's grip, rushing toward the wreckage, but the general pulled him back, holding him with a grief that mirrored Malik's own. Rahim was gone. The faction's attack faltered soon after, driven back by Idran's forces once reinforcements arrived. Dawn eventually broke across the valley, soft light revealing the damage, walls scorched, sand stained, silence heavy as mourning cloth. Soldiers moved slowly, exhaustion carving deep lines into their faces. Malik sat near the ruins of the bunker, the insignia warm in his clenched palm, tears drying on his dirt-streaked cheeks. Idran approached him quietly, lowering himself beside the boy. He told Malik that Rahim's testimony, and his sacrifice, would be honored and recorded truthfully. The valley's history would no longer be shaped by lies whispered in dark rooms. Malik nodded silently. His heart felt splintered, yet grounded by the weight of meaning Rahim had entrusted to him. Together, he and Idran stood as the sun rose, casting gold across the valley Rahim had once called home. In the stillness, Malik whispered a farewell, not just to an old man, but to a mentor who had shaped his understanding of courage, truth, and quiet defiance. The valley exhaled with the new day, humbled by the cost of revelation. And somewhere in the shifting morning light, Malik felt Rahim's presence linger, steady, warm, unbroken, like a memory refusing to fade, like truth refusing to remain buried.